I'm Juniper Owens, Director of the Academy of Integrative Mental Health, and your host for this edition of Mental Health News Updates for the months of February and March. In this Mental Health News Update, we cover the 21 states with proposed or passed laws restricting gender-affirming care. We also discuss public art engagement and its mental health benefits, and our research reviews on the impact of natural disasters and disaster fatigue. And we close with a very interesting Did You Know segment about the secret powers of people who nap. So in the headlines, 21 states propose or pass laws restricting gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care refers to medical, psychological, or social support provided to some people who identify as transgender. Gender-affirming care can include a range of interventions such as hormone therapy, gender-affirming surgeries, mental health support, and social transition support. Gender-affirming care is recognized as a necessary and effective form of medical care for individuals with gender dysphoria, and access to such care is considered a human right by many organizations, including the World Health Organization. Research has shown that gender-affirming medical care can significantly improve the mental health and quality of life of transgender and gender-diverse individuals. Studies have shown that hormone therapy can lead to significant improvements in the mental health and well-being of trans individuals, including reduced anxiety and depression, improved self-esteem, and reduced gender dysphoria. A systematic review of 28 studies found that hormone therapy was associated with improved mental health outcomes, including reduced depression and anxiety symptoms and improved quality of life. Access to gender-affirming care, including hormone therapy and gender-affirming surgeries, is also associated with reduced risk of suicide among trans individuals. A study of transgender adults found that those who had undergone gender-affirming surgery had lower rates of psychological distress and lower risk of suicide. So far this year, 21 states are considering a total of 72 bills, according to data provided by the ACLU, that seek to restrict gender-affirming care for trans youth. The bills carry severe penalties for healthcare providers and sometimes families who seek or provide gender-affirming care for minors. In some U.S. states, laws have been passed prohibiting healthcare providers from providing gender-affirming medical care to minors, even with parental consent. These laws often prevent doctors from prescribing hormone therapy or performing gender-affirming surgeries for transgender minors. Such laws have been passed in Arkansas, Alabama, South Dakota, and Tennessee. In February of 2022, the governor of Texas issued an order restricting access to gender-affirming medical care for trans youth, including the use of hormones to delay puberty and to promote physical development that is consistent with the child's gender identity. The order classifies the provision of gender-affirming care as child abuse and directs the state's Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate any reported instance of healthcare providers or parents who provide or seek out gender-affirming care for children. The order impacts as many as 13,800 transgender youth in the state. Both the Arkansas law and Texas order are currently being challenged in court. A bill proposed in Missouri would attempt to limit access to gender-affirming care by classifying it as child abuse, similar to the order recently issued in Texas. Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Indiana, Wyoming, West Virginia, and Montana have bills that would restrict gender-affirming care for minors under 18. Kentucky State Bill 150 passed out of committee this February. Listen to this clip of local news report discussing elements of the bill and voices that both oppose and support the bill.
Senate Bill 150 passed out of committee on a party line vote of 11-1, and that was despite passionate public comment, all of which was against the bill. Senate Bill 150's sponsor, Max Wise, says his bill is about parental engagement. It requires schools to notify parents when students use physical or mental health services. It blocks a Kentucky Department of Education recommendation encouraging teachers to use a student's preferred pronoun. And it requires parents to be notified about sex ed courses, which the bill states must be, quote, developmentally appropriate.
These are all topics and discussions that parents need to be aware of, always in the upbringing of their children.
Dozens of LGBTQ activists packed the hearing to speak against the bill. saying confidential services could be life-saving.
I was terrified that someone at my school was going to tell my parents, especially the teachers, if I went to seek support, if I went to seek the guidance counselor or anything like that.
They say transgender youth are already at high risk for depression and suicide because of the way they are marginalized.
This is child sacrifice to get votes, and God will show no mercy on those pushing that agenda. Thank you.
Among those in attendance was Senator Karen Berg, whose transgender son died by suicide in December.
My child killed himself, guys, because he didn't want to face this again. All over the country, in every state house.
Supporters of the bill say they are voting their conscience.
We talk about our kids being wired certain ways. Kids are kids, and a lot of the wiring that takes place in these kids is from influence and experiences that adults expose them to.
Senator Wise, do you believe a parent has a fundamental right to make the decisions for their minor children and the upbringing and their educational opportunities?
100% yes.
Nonetheless, many in the audience are vowing to continue fighting the bill.
Tennessee passed a bill last year restricting surgery for minors and banning hormone treatments for prepubescent kids. But this year has introduced a new bill that would expand restrictions on gender-affirming care. Mississippi has already passed a bill in the House, according to local outlet Mississippi Today, that would ban gender-affirming care for trans youth under 18. Most recently, Utah's Republican governor signed bills that ban youth from receiving gender-affirming care and allow families to receive scholarships to pay for education outside of the public school system, both measures that are part of a larger nationwide movement. Many of these proposed bills carry severe penalties for healthcare providers and sometimes families who provide or seek out gender-affirming care for minors. In each of these states, the bills would either criminalize healthcare providers who provide gender-affirming care to minors or subject them to discipline from state licensing boards. Bills in 10 states would also allow individuals to file civil suits for damages against medical providers who violate these laws. Bills in 6 states provide penalties for parents who facilitate minors' access to gender-affirming medical care. A report from the Human Rights Campaign found that out of over 300 bills in the U.S. in 2022 targeting the rights of LGBTQ individuals, including bills prohibiting gender-affirming health care for trans youth, less than 10% of them became law. Gender-affirming care, including the use of hormones to delay puberty and to promote the development of secondary sex characteristics that are consistent with the child's gender identity, is recommended for transgender youth by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Endocrine Society, and is viewed by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and the American Psychiatric Association as evidence-based patient care. Moreover, the American Medical Association supports insurance coverage for gender-affirming care for transgender people. The measures banning gender-affirming procedures and hormone therapies play into the greater ideological divide between conservative and progressive policymakers on the treatment of gender dysphoria and the culture war playing out affecting trans and gender non-conforming individuals.
We're witnessing the newest evolution of the culture wars, a term first popularized nearly 30 years ago in a book by James Davison Hunter. He's also the executive director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture at the University of Virginia. So it was 30 years ago you used this phrase, culture wars. You were trying to capture sort of the national divides and debates over issues like abortion rights and LGBTQ rights and the role of religion in schools. How have the culture wars from 30 years ago changed? What's different today?
One of the most important differences is the ways in which the culture wars have now become class culture wars. Progressives tend to predominate in the upper middle class, highly educated professionals and managers, and traditionalists, conservatives tend to cluster in the middle, lower middle, and working classes. The class differences are highlighting real differences in life chances and opportunities, the horizons of the future that mean so much to everyday life.
I guess definitionally, too, maybe I can ask you to help us understand how you look at the phrase, what culture wars even mean today, because it feels almost as if the term is applied reflexively to any issue that people disagree on that's not purely a matter of policy. You can talk about science or sports or education or anything, and it becomes a culture war issue. So how do you see it?
So culture wars can be understood in two different ways. The main way in which people think about culture wars is in terms of the politics of culture. It's essentially about politics, but around cultural issues. So it's the politics of abortion. It's the politics of gay rights, lesbian rights. It's the politics of race and the like. The second way in which the culture wars plays out is in terms of the culture of politics. It's the symbolic environment within which politics and our democracy unfolds.
Also in the headlines, public art engagement to improve mental health. Humans have had a relationship with the arts for a very long time. For at least 45,500 years, to be exact. This is the estimated date of the first known cave painting of a pig in ochre in Indonesia. Since then, human expression of art has taken many forms and has played significant roles in health and well-being in societies, culturally, spiritually, and individually. Daisy Fancourt with the University College London conducts research around art engagement in public health.
There have been debates for centuries about whether art has any particular purpose within our society. There have been these arguments that art is just for art's sake and should just be enjoyed as a pleasurable aesthetic experience. But also what we've started to see is a lot of studies, research studies, suggesting that actually engagement with the arts can have benefits for our health and well-being. One of the challenges from these studies is that many of these over the last few decades have focused on specific interventions, so carefully crafted programs where people deliberately take part in new arts activities to try and improve a particular aspect of their health. Now, these have given us fantastic results about mental, physical, cognitive benefits.
With declining funds for the arts and the role art plays in human societies, it is worth wondering how this is impacting mental health. Many studies show a correlation between engagement with the arts and improved health outcomes. For example, researchers have used biofeedback to study the effects of visual art on neural circuits and neuroendocrine markers to find biological evidence that visual art promotes health and wellness and fosters adaptive responses to stress. In another study, cognitive neuroscientists have found that creating art reduces cortisol levels, which are the markers for stress, and that through art, people can induce positive mental states. These studies are a part of a new field of research called neuroaesthetics, the scientific study of the neurobiological basis of the arts. Public art's ability to decrease stress, elicit awe, develop shared identity, reinforces self-efficacy, and promote positive health behaviors are clear public health impacts. That these impacts are stronger with a strong creative engagement emphasizes the importance of the holistic, aesthetic impact of public art as opposed to other forms of public engagement. So, we know that art has been a necessary part of human culture, and some organizations are taking action to make art engagement more accessible. Murals in Mind, a project initiated recently by the St. Petersburg Arts Alliance, a nonprofit organization that advocates, educates, and supports the local creative community. The idea was to pair existing public murals with performance art via a smartphone app, specifically chosen to help evoke hopeful feelings that they think might improve mental health.
The heart's a maze it's easy to get lost in. Freeways and exits, your gas gauge tipping into red. Keep rolling, you'll find your luck. That wah-wah on the corner still lit up.
Paige Dickinson, Associate Professor of Human Development at Eckerd College, who also is a clinical health psychologist and a board-certified drama therapist, consulted for the project. Dickinson was asked to sit down with SPAA staff to review the murals they had selected. Once they picked the murals and the art or music or poetry that went with them, Paige gave them feedbacks and suggestions. Is this poem a good match for the piece of art Or this piece of music. With music, you have to think about tempo and key. Music in a major key tends to have more positive response, while music in a minor key can activate a sad response, Dickinson said. We are working with people's feelings and emotions, she adds, and for a non-therapeutic organization to understand from the beginning and seek out a consultant to be sure they're using art positively and safely for healing is amazing. It's a turning point in my profession. Cities around the world have integrated public art into their infrastructure, and many are working to increase engagement. In 2016, River City Company, Tinker Ma, and Public Art Chattanooga partnered to create an alley activation program called Passageways, which temporarily converted 5 downtown Chattanooga alleyways into pop-up art installations. Or like Brooklyn artist Rachel Sussman, who in her Sidewalk Kink Sukuroi series mends city pavements using tree sap-based resin dusted with bronze and 23.5 karat gold, finding inspiration in the Japanese practice of applying golden pigment to cracks in ceramic objects, known as kintsukuroi. She found inspiration in the beauty of the broken, celebrating rather than disguising flaws, and calling attention to a values object through the passage of time. Sussman's painstaking process of gilding can take weeks, and the repairs themselves are fleeting. Says the artist, they will be walked on and scuffed and eventually overwritten with something else. Such is the transient nature of everything in the universe. All the more reason to value the time we have. I would love to walk down a sidewalk with gold-filled cracks. In celebration of Mental Health Awareness Day, October 10th, Art Mejo collaborated with the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Jordan to launch the #MindTheMind campaign. Aimed at raising awareness about mental health through public art, this campaign tackles the rampant stigmatization of such issues among the Jordanian community. The #MindTheMind campaign begins to tackle these issues, encouraging open conversations about mental health and casting a positive outlook on mental health problems. The mural's uplifting colors and optimistic imagery demonstrate to the public that mental health does not always have to be a dark and negative topic. Rather, the murals celebrate mental health and encourage the acceptance of all mental struggles, no matter how small or large. Also, innovations in smartphone technology, like that used in Murals and Mind Project discussed earlier, also increase access and engagement. One example is Shakespeare's Globe launched Globe Player, a service that allows users to stream and or download its productions onto their computers and mobile devices. Online audiences can watch 51 of the theater's past productions wherever and whenever they happen to be. Another really cool way to enjoy public art and get out on a rainy day is hydrophobic sidewalk art. One company called Rainworks is making this kind of invisible ink accessible to everyone.
My name is Peregrine Church. I'm the creator of Rainworks. A rainwork is a piece of street art that appears when it rains. On a dry day, you can't see it. It's totally invisible. But when you walk by it on a rainy day, or if someone gets it wet, it shows up like magic. The purpose of Rainworks is to turn rainy days from something dreary into a reason to smile. The secret is a super hydrophobic coating we have called invisible spray. If you spray it onto a surface like concrete or wood, it'll keep it from getting wet. Water will just beat up and roll off it. So we spray it through a stencil. Everywhere we sprayed it stays light, everywhere else gets dark, and that contrast creates the image. It's meant to be like a pleasant surprise on a rainy day.
Find out ways your local community offers accessible ways to engage in public art and make a resource guide for your clients that might be interested. So in this research review, we looked at disaster and disaster fatigue. The recent and devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria resulted in more than 47,244 deaths as the most recent counts. Before that, were the floods in New Zealand and the record-breaking tornadoes in the U.S., including the one in Mayfield, Kentucky, in which 73 people lost their lives, and the cost exceeded $3.7 billion. Natural disasters can have significant impact on mental health. These events can cause trauma, loss, and disruption to daily life, leading to a range of mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. As we settle into 2023, conversations around natural disasters are rampant. From Hurricane Ian to catastrophic flooding in Pakistan and Afghanistan, communities around the globe were and are devastated by climate disasters. Knowing climate change is responsible for the increased frequency and severity of crises like floods, droughts, wildfires, and tropical storms. It's time we consider how natural these disasters are after all. According to earthday.org, we can expect a higher frequency of extreme weather events to continue unless we critically reflect on our own hand in climate change and make transformative systemic changes. Research has shown that the psychological effects of natural disasters can be long-lasting, with some individuals experiencing symptoms of PTSD and other mental health problems years after the event. Factors such as the severity of the disaster, level of exposure, and access to support and resources can influence the extent of the impact on mental health. In addition to the immediate psychological effects, natural disasters can also have indirect effects on mental health. For example, they can lead to financial stress, social isolation, and disruptions to healthcare access, which can all contribute to mental health problems. In addition to the immediate psychological effects, natural disasters can also have indirect effects on mental health. For example, they can lead to financial stress, social isolation, and disruptions to healthcare access, which can all contribute to mental health in a detrimental way. It is important for individuals and communities affected by natural disasters to have access to mental health resources and support services to help manage the emotional and psychological effects of these events. This can include counseling, therapy, and other forms of mental health treatment, as well as access to basic necessities such as food, shelter, and medical care. In a study of 669 residents of New York City and Long Island, New York, exposed to Superstorm Sandy in 2012, researchers found that a third of study respondents reported depression years later. Anxiety was likely in almost half, and a fifth had probable post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. Increased exposure to Sandy's effects was tied to increased risk for these outcomes. Another study of the population that lived through Sandy found that people who experienced the specific stresses of personal or property damage were at risk for also having PTSD. Natural disasters can have significant emotional impact on people who read about them in the news or on social media. Even though they are not directly affected by the disaster, people may experience feelings of anxiety, fear, and helplessness as they learn about the extent of the damage and the number of people affected. For some individuals, reading about natural disasters can activate memories of past traumatic experiences, such as other natural disasters or personal tragedies, which can further exacerbate their emotional response. In addition, constant exposure to news and social media coverage of natural disasters can lead to a phenomenon known as disaster fatigue or compassion fatigue, where individuals become desensitized to the suffering of others and feel overwhelmed or powerless to make a difference.
Disaster fatigue is probably a coping mechanism rather than a character flaw.
Susan Silk says it's a challenge many people are facing. The psychologist and mental health worker with the American Red Cross says there's a difficult balance for the people issuing the alerts.
What can meteorologists at this time and behavioral health people do to craft a message that people won't tune out, that won't induce yet more disaster fatigue?
There isn't a single strategy for combating disaster fatigue, says Tara Powell, a behavioral health expert at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. But the current studies could help researchers and emergency planners tailor interventions to specific communities and individuals, she said, helping them not only prepare for impending disasters, but also recover in the aftermath. In the meantime, she and other researchers are hoping the kind of disaster fatigue they documented this year proves to be the exception and not the rule. But with the evidence and research of climate change, that doesn't seem to be the case. Several research studies have explored the concept of disaster fatigue and its impact on mental health. For example, a study published in the Journal of Applied Social Psychology in 2013 surveyed over 1,000 participants who had been exposed to media coverage of a natural disaster such as a hurricane or earthquake. These researchers found that the more exposure participants had to media coverage of the disaster, the more likely they were to experience symptoms of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Another study published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress in 2015 found that healthcare workers who were repeatedly exposed to the trauma and suffering of disaster victims experienced higher levels of burnout, emotional exhaustion, and compassion fatigue. Disaster psychologists work to promote psychological resilience and support the mental health needs of individuals and communities affected by climate-related natural disasters or other traumatic events. Here are some recommendations that they may offer for promoting mental health: seeking social support, engaging in self-care, staying informed, which is interesting because a lot of people say that they struggle to keep up and read about these disasters in the news, but these researchers say that staying informed about the latest news and updates related to the disaster can help individuals feel more in control and better prepared to cope with ongoing challenges. They also recommend to connect with mental health resources, to practice resilience building skills, and to get involved in recovery efforts. Volunteering or supporting disaster recovery efforts can help individuals feel a sense of purpose and agency, which can promote mental health and well-being. Overall, disaster psychologists emphasize the importance of taking an active role in promoting one's own mental health and seeking support when needed to cope with the ongoing challenges of disaster recovery. And in this advocacy alert, speaking of disaster psychologist recommendations, one of those were taking action to address the possible strains of the current influx of natural disasters exacerbated by climate change. Here are a few organizations offering aid and support in Turkey and Syria. These are ways to donate according to PBS. UNICEF is on the ground in Turkey and Syria, helping children and families in the aftermath of these two devastating earthquakes. The Turkish Red Crescent is accepting donations and providing nutritional services and blood supplies for those affected or wounded by the earthquakes. Humanity and Inclusion plans to expand its team in Syria to help provide mental health rehabilitation services and will be deploying some rehab specialists to Turkey. Mercy Corps is working to aid those affected in northwest Syria by placing a limited infrastructure where 1.8 million people are living in camps after being displaced by years of armed conflict. They say that they're looking primarily at shelter as the immediate need because within northwest Syria, a lot of the infrastructure is damaged. Houses have collapsed, apartment blocks have collapsed. Doctors Without Borders are working with health authorities to provide medical aid. The Syrian American Medical Society is providing urgent medical care. Many hospitals in the region were already stretched thin, and others were damaged by the earthquakes. Social justice organization CARE International is working to assess the most urgent needs in the area. Teams and partners are trying to deliver blankets, food, mattresses, tents, and other non-food items to people in need in the harsh weather conditions, according to the organization. The Syrian Emergency Task Force is responding to the emergency by providing water, tents, food, blankets, medicine, and other supplies necessary. Donations are being accepted by this task force. Also, the nonprofit aid organization International Medical Corps is accepting donations to make medical care and supplies available. So all of the links to these organizations will be in the show notes. Other ways to help are to organize a fundraiser or give blood. Now, finally, did you know? Are you a person that loves naps or wish you could nap during the day? There are many famous people who credit napping for their creativity. Like Salvador Dali, the surrealist painter who would often take a nap while sitting in his chair, holding a key in his hand so that when he fell asleep, the key would fall and wake him up, giving him fresh ideas for his art. Or Thomas Edison, the famous inventor who was a proponent of napping and would often take short naps throughout the day to recharge his energy and focus. The former U.S. President Ronald Reagan was known to take naps every afternoon to help him stay alert and focused during long work hours. Albert Einstein, the famous physicist who would often take naps to help him clear his mind and come up with new ideas for his work. Also, inventor and artist Leonardo da Vinci took many naps. It was said that he followed a unique sleep schedule known as the Da Vinci sleep pattern, which involved taking several short naps throughout the day and night rather than sleeping for a single block of time at night. This sleep pattern allowed him to maximize his productivity and creativity, as he could work for several hours, take a nap, and then return to work refreshed and focused. It is believed that Da Vinci's unique sleep pattern may have been a factor in his ability to produce such a large volume of work and make significant contributions to a wide range of fields from art to engineering to science.
Nap time. Doesn't it just bring back all those blissful childhood memories? Don't you wish you could go back to a simpler time when naps were baked into your day? While you can't go back in time to those days, you could always move to somewhere like Spain, Italy, the Middle East, or anywhere else where afternoon naps or siestas are basically the law. But do they know something we in the US don't? Are afternoon naps really that good for you?
Napping has several benefits for both physical and mental health. Some of the key benefits of napping include improved alertness and performance. Napping can help reduce fatigue and improve cognitive function, including memory, attention, and reaction time. Reduce stress and improved mood. Napping can help reduce stress levels and improve mood, which can have a positive impact on overall mental health and well-being. Boosted creativity and problem solving. Napping has been shown to enhance creativity and problem-solving skills, as it allows the brain to process and consolidate information in new ways. This can be particularly useful for people who work in creative fields or need to solve complex problems. Also, napping can help reduce the risk of heart disease, stroke, and other health problems, as it allows the body to rest and recover from physical activity. Additionally, napping has been shown to improve immune function, which can help reduce the risk of illness and disease. Overall, napping can be a useful tool for improving overall health and well-being, and can be particularly beneficial for people who struggle with sleep or have irregular sleep schedules. It is important to note, however, that napping is not a replacement for sleep hygiene, but can be used to supplement, or just to take a break and recuperate. Rest is resistance. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Mental Health News Updates for February and March. Do you have anything to say, any comments, any suggestions, any thoughts? Please leave us a comment, or you can check out our website, www.academyimh.com, where we have all kinds of ways to connect.